Blast versus the Viltrumites is something that I've always wanted to do, especially now since how much Invincible is trending. A race of advanced alien beings that seek to expand their galactic empire by conquering other planets, going up against Blast, who's keen to protect the One Punch Man's Earth. What happens if these aliens set their differences apart and try to defeat this Earth's so-called #1 hero? In this video, we'll try to assess both of these versus' overall stats, abilities, and hacks to determine if these Viltrumites can ever hope to overcome this planet's strongest weapon, Blast. But before that, make sure to destroy the subscribe button and the notification bell for more of these matchup videos. Thank you. Compared to a certain similar series owned by the same platform that converses about heroes, the Invincible verse do actually contain really strong characters that consistently demonstrate their advanced level of strength. Omni-Man, same as Homelander, was portrayed by its story to share many commonalities with DC's most recognizable character. However, what if I tell you that Nolan Grayson is actually just a part of a race that has many members who are either comparable to him in strength or straight up superior? The Viltrumites, similar to Dragon Ball Saiyans, has one definitive purpose, which is conquering other planets. These beings are obviously confident in their own strength to tangle with any being in the universe under the right circumstances. But how strong are these characters? You see, to get a general idea, I find it fit to start with the strongest piece of showing that this series has provided, and then upscale or downscale characters based on the inverse rankings. For starters, the feat that tends to be talked about a lot when Invincible is part of the conversation is Nolan, Mark, and Theodos destroying Viltrum's planet. This, from a narrative standpoint, needed two criteria in order to make it work. Number 1, Space Racer's gun targeted and shot at the center of Viltrum's core, destabilizing the planet. And 2, required the strength of these three combatants sinking their flight speed and charging strength in perfect harmony to collide into the planet's core. Although they managed to destroy the planet, they still suffered immensely from the after effect impact. Now, assuming they did equal work, which is what the narrative implies, each one of them would possess force relative to that of 0.5 zetatons of TNT, making them small planet level in terms of attack potency individually, which means that other prominent Viltrumites who can contend with either Mark or Nolan, such as Anissa, Thula, Crack, Conquest, and Ursa, should possess similar levels of strength. Which brings us to Thrag, the ruler of the Viltrum Empire, and potentially end of the series mark that comparable to the other members should be much stronger. Now, if you take in consideration the fact that Thrag threw hands with literally everybody, dominated Nolan, and easily ripped Theodos' head from his shoulder like it's a piece of cake, you may be able to argue that he'd be approaching the planetary levels of strength or slightly above. This would certainly require him to have the strength of roughly 100 Nolans, which makes it hard to believe. But judging of how dominant his reign was and how the story implies him to be a monster above monsters, you can maybe wank him to that degree. Putting him at planetary levels would be fitting for this video. Now, it's very important to understand that the strength of these characters within the Invincible series would certainly cap at this level. However, if you want to use the nerdy route, tangling in buried iffy stuff such as crossovers that comics-wise sometimes imply to be in canon, then Omni-Man was able to stalemate Youngblood's Mean Supreme. You see, according to Suprema, which is a character stated capable of playing kickball with a star, her and Supreme should be on the same league, which makes Omni-Man possibly a star-level Viltrumite. However, does that mean the other characters from Invincible would scale to this, with Thrag being much superior? The clear answer would be an absolute no. Reasons being is that characters in crossovers are not the main version of the character, but rather just an alternative version, meaning this is a different version of Omni-Man written by another creator that would scale even above Thrag himself. And for the sake of the gravity of this matchup, we would be including this version of Omni-Man. Now, when talking about speed, it's pretty evident that characters on the level of Omni-Man in the vacuum space would have to operate at thousands of times the speed of light. Although it has been implied that their speeds aren't that fast in Earth since they need to hold back, but the show consistently demonstrates that the other relevant Viltrumites can at least least keep up with Nolan's flight speed in combat, with others being straight up much more superior. However, that's only when you take calcs in consideration, as the databook clearly states that Nolan has been operating at near light velocity. I mean, there are obviously so many feats that suggest that these characters can fight and react at faster than light speeds, such as Alan dodging and perceiving a Viltrumite warship, and Invincible immediately using his top speed to outrace COP's fastest ship. So if we say that their flight speed would equal their combat and reaction speed, then most of them would have massively faster than light plus speed, obviously scaling to Omni-Man traveling through galaxies. And with all of this being said, how would they deal with Earth's official strongest hero? Blast, the #1 hero, strongest aside from Saitama himself, is a character that was mysterious for so many years, made his first official appearance in chapter 139, outspeeding one of the fastest characters in the entire verse. His abilities and how they work exactly remains unknown till this day due to the many redraws One Punch Man has gone through. However, we'd certainly have to rely on some certain feats and statements he has done in the pre-retcon version, since Blast doesn't really have that much showings. You see, narratively speaking, Blast is a being that only involves himself in situations of the highest difficulties. Simply splitting a continent or shaking the earth isn't even worth his attention, since the opponents he had to deal with regularly are called avatars of God, each implied to being threats that can endanger the survival of humanity. As a matter of fact, the first we've seen Blast in action was in his one fight against Cosmic Fear Garu, a being that is so strong that can casually create a black hole generating force relative to that of 247 neotatons of TNT, capable of destroying a large planet. But not only was Blast fully aware of that fact, he was still ready to fight even after carrying accumulated damage from prior fights. He goes after to perform a much better feat, which is holding off the energy of 2 serious punches for a while and arguably tanked being caught inside the explosion. This is a very impressive feat, since that attack proved to have enough force to put a large void in space, destroying multiple stars and possibly galaxies. While Blast doesn't necessarily scale directly to this, but being in the same range, arguably tanking that energy while holding it would require a ton loads of force. So Blast being multi-solar system level wouldn't be that far-fetched. Now when it comes to speed, it's very difficult to quantify how fast he really is. But for a retrospect, Flashy Flash, a character that can easily outspeed light itself, gets frequently blitzed by the #1 hero. This is certainly considered less impressive compared to his feats against Cosmic Fear Garu, being able to match his pace and defend himself against any and all attacks. Garu is a character that evolves fast enough to blitz a monster he was just relative to. However, if you want to go by the pre-retcon feats, things can be very complicated. You see, Blast can fight against Empty Void, a being that can operate outside of causality, stated to have an overpowered attack called the Dimensional Slash, being capable of ignoring distance, size, and energy, made a lot of people believe that the concept of speed no longer applies to that entity in any way. Honestly speaking, there has been multiple arguments saying that this attack isn't instantaneous as you can see it traveling, but from a narrative standpoint, there has been some statements alluding to the fact that if Blast doesn't fist bump and use his black hole portals, there would be no other effective way to dodge it or deflect it. Well, obviously other than Saitama. This, as I said in this particular video, explains how Blast was able to outspeed both Rage Saitama and Cosmic Fear Garu, managed to teleport them before they even collided their fists, which would mean that Blast's action of fist bumping and using his black hole portal also has irrelevant speed. But as we're fully aware now, all of these feats has been retconned and we're only using them for the lack of general showings. Now, when talking about Blast in general, it's very essential to talk about his abilities, as they make him much more dangerous and very versatile. You see, Blast has stated to have the capabilities to manipulate the reality of the cosmos, makes him able to create hyperspace portals to travel between dimensions. He can also use them effectively during the fight to teleport other attacks or parts of himself, and has access to other abilities like throwing dimensional cannons and punching with the force of gravity. All of these are applications displayed so far on screen, and I'm sure we'd see more of him in the future. But with all of this being said, can Blast stop the Viltrumites from invading the planet? Now, judging from the overall purpose of the Viltrum Empire, which is invading and conquering other planets to expand their reach, paired with how physically strong they would definitely be considered as god-level threats within the One Punch Man verse. With the staggering numbers they have and how strong they generally are, they would definitely be able to pose a huge threat to the One Punch Man planet and be able to give the S-class heroes a run for their money. However, if Blast decided to show up, unlike when Earth had to deal with Boros' invasion, can he by himself handle the strongest Viltrumites? Now, when comparing both of their general stats, you'd be able to conclude that Blast can certainly handle their strength without much of difficulties. The level of power they can exert is oddly similar to what Orochi can generate, extracting energy from the Earth's core, causing a worldwide earthquake. Although this attack is certainly considered as impressive in the One Punch Man verse, it is still something that doesn't require the attention of the #1 hero. As a matter of fact, Blast operates at a high tier even compared to the dominator of the universe Boros, a being that can be comparable to Thrag in terms of destructiveness. Keep in mind that even the strongest Viltrumite is generously given planetary levels of AP by giving him an unreasonable multiplier to Omni-Man, which ultimately means that none of these Viltrumites can manage to hurt Blast. You see, even if you want to include Nolan from the crossover comics, being only star level would still not be able to cut it against a being who can contain the Serious Punch Square energy for a period of time. However, when you take speed in consideration, if Blast's opponents are vastly faster than him, then some of you would say that multiple accumulated planetary to star level hits would eventually be able to hurt him if they do not fatigue in the process. Since if you think that Omni-Man's flight speed equals his reaction and combat speed, then most of these Viltrumites would be able to operate at massively faster than Light Plus, something that Blast unfortunately still hasn't displayed. Strictly speaking, if you want to use pre-Rakan Blast who can dodge attacks that ignores causality when he uses his black hole portals, you can then argue that as soon as he notices the vast difference in speed, he'd resort in taking them down using that one ability. If that's the case, then the Viltrumites would eventually have no answer to such a hacks, as they would be completely outclassed in every regard. Even if they figure out that fist bumping is the requirement to achieve this advantage, they still wouldn't have the necessary strength to take off his arms same way Empty Void did. But in contrary, Blast can even separate them by sending them to different dimensions, giving himself the option to fight and cripple them individually. However, prior to the redraws, this would have been the conclusion of this video, since for now, speed-wise, there are no valid arguments to suggest that Blast would be able to deal with their speeds. The only best feat that he has in this regard is outspeeding both Saitama and Garu in that one very controversial exchange, nothing really there to quantify how fast he needed to move in order to send them away, which would make this whole fight close due to Blast being vastly superior in strength and the Viltrumites being vastly superior in speed. If Blast uses non-conventional tricks by surrounding himself with portals to catch them despite the vast difference in speed, he'd may be able to pull it off, but if he doesn't, this would most unlikely result in a stalemate. Some would say that a Viltrumite like Thrag has fought Battle Beast for days, arguing that he'd have the stamina to keep hitting Blast until he eventually hurts him. However, the vast difference between being planetary and multi-solar system in terms of AP and durability is just so large. Blast has the ultimate option of using BFR, which is battlefield removal, sending each one of them into different dimensions, trapping them for a long period of time is still considered a win. But listen, if you feel like Blast wouldn't be able to do this due to the vast difference in speed, I'd say sure, that's indeed a huge possibility, but they also wouldn't be able to hurt him either, paired with the fact that Blast still has other ways to win, especially since these guys shouldn't be aware of how his portals work, as we've seen that he can use a portal large enough to teleport himself, Cosmic Fear Garu and Saitama. Not to mention that in the pre-Rakan version, he teleported the entire Hero Association headquarters and it looked like he didn't even break a sweat, which means he would most unlikely be able to use a Grand Portal to send them away despite the difference in speed if they keep attacking him. But nonetheless, as I said before, if you wanna use pre-Rakan Blast with his ability to teleport even in the face of an attack that can ignore causality, then Blast would be able to eventually win against them. However, if you wanna use current Blast against these Viltrumites, then I'd be willing to say that things things can be very close. Ultimately, it depends on these factors. Can they eventually hurt him given the necessary time, and can he teleport them despite the difference in speed? Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, please take good care. Targeted and shot at the center of Viltrumite's core destabilized. Oh my god. Then Omni-Man was able to stalemate Youngblood's. Oh my god. Youngblood. Then Omni-Man was able to stalemate Youngblood's. Then Omni-Man was able to stalemate Youngblood's mean supreme. Damn. Easily ripped Theodis' hand, dominated Nolan, and easily ripped Theodis' hand, dominated Nolan and easily ripped off, dominated Nolan and easily ripped Theodis' head,